Today we're going to talk about using colored pencil. As I mentioned before, our project, our name illustration, is going to be finished off with color pencil. Now I know you have probably used color pencil before. Our goal though is to increase your skill and knowledge of using colored pencil in artwork. So we're going to go over a couple of different things. The first we're going to talk about are application types. So application of colored pencil. I like to break it down into two simple types of application. The first I call directional, and this is probably the one you are most used to when you work with colored pencil. So I'm going to choose a colored pencil here. An example of directional would be just moving your pencil back and forth as you color. That could be in a diagonal movement. Sometimes we may go horizontal. Sometimes maybe vertical. But all we're doing is moving our pencil to one side and the other. This is an okay technique, especially if you take care of how you apply it within a certain space. So in this case, we have a heavy dark outline around our drawn letters from the objects, and this is an example sheet. I'm going to be demonstrating some color pencil techniques with you. So I took and traced some of my letters from my good project for this, and we already know we have this outline of Sharpie marker, and as long as I am careful in staying within my lines, when I want to color a certain area, I could possibly use directional shading. But one thing about directional shading is sometimes it's a little uneven. You can kind of see the strokes, kind of creates this kind of striped effect from moving our pencil. Sometimes we get little gaps in between. So there is a different coloring method that I would like you to start experimenting with, exploring, and using. And that is what we call circular. You will also sometimes see it referred to as smooth. So circular or smooth shading is taking our color pencil and moving the tip in a circular motion. And I'm not moving it too wide. I don't want to create large circles like this. Okay, so I want to keep them on the smaller side. So larger ones are a no-no. We want to go for more of this small movement. And what you're going to do when working with the circular shading technique, whether it is graphite pencil or color pencil, is as you move in this circular motion, you start venturing away and coming back just a little tiny bit. It's called overlapping. So I'm overlapping my pencil strokes over and over and over again. I like to correlate it to a scene in the movie Finding Nemo. So if you've ever watched Finding Nemo, you may remember the scene where Nemo goes to attend his first day of school, and it takes him a while to leave home because his father keeps on having him swimming out and back in and out and back in, and that's kind of what your pencil is doing. It swims out away from this large chunk, comes back in, out, comes back in, and by overlapping constantly like this, it's going to allow us to get a smoother, more field application of color in an area without any stroke movements visible. So we won't see any vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines. We're just going to have a more solid mass of color. So I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and if you haven't already, try these two techniques out. Okay, so now that we've talked about a couple of different ways to apply color pencil, now we're going to talk about value and shading. So if you've noticed, our sketchbook that we have been working on has been using a lot of terms and introducing us to a lot of techniques that we've been using in this project. So when we were working on the drawing part of our project, we were looking to use foreshortening and surface when drawing our objects. And now this week's lesson is on shading. So we know shading is the darkness you apply to an object on the opposite side of the light source. And we have talked before about value when we reviewed our elements of design in our sketchbook. So if you have your sketchbook handy, and if you turn to those notes we took that day, we have a little section on value, and we broke up a long rectangle into 5 sections, and we used nothing but pressure using graphite pencil to create light, medium to dark values. And I also mentioned that you could try that if you had colored pencils at home with colored pencil. So our first look at applying value and shading is of course going to be about pressure. So again, to do this quickly, I'm going to use the directional shading technique. And as we already practiced in our sketchbook before, if I apply very little pressure to my pencil point, and as I move across my paper, if I increase that pressure, and increase it, and increase it, and increase it, press harder onto the tip of my pencil, I can create value. So I have light values, I have into the medium range, and of course dark values. As a beginner working with colored pencil and starting to work with the circular shading technique, I would say that as we learn and talk about colored pencil, you're going to want to use your light values to maybe up to a little bit past medium for pressure. This is the ones we're going to use the most. So these are our most used pressures. From about medium dark to your darkest pressure or your heaviest pressure. So remember to get dark values, we're creating heavy pressure, and light values is light pressure. I want you to use these very rarely. Now the reason why I want you to use these rarely is because a good practice to use with color pencil, and what we're going to practice next, is layers. We want to be able to apply layers of colored pencil on top of each other to create not only values but also to mix colors. So for my project, I am using a 12 count pack of Sargent Art color pencils. You may have a set of Crayola or another brand name, And usually when you look at them in the store, you're going to find the 12 color set. Now you could have a larger set you are using, which means you have a wider range of colors. But no matter what the size of your color pencil pack, layers are how we want to apply color pencil to, as I said, not only create value, but different colors. So the first one we're going to go over in the layering technique is just using one color. And this is going to be similar to what we did with pressure, but now I'm going to practice my circular shading technique. And I'm going to apply it with more of a medium pressure. And I'm going to let it get lighter as I come across. So that means I am going to ease up on my pressure as I come across here. So this is very similar to what we just did above with pressure, only using the circular shading technique. But if I want to make this even darker, I'm not even going to increase the amount of pressure I apply. I'm just going to go back over top with a second layer of color pencil. So hopefully you're noticing that even with just that second layer, and again I'm going to ease up on pressure, my color pencil, my value darkened a little bit. So I'm going to try it again. Again, I'm not pressing any more hard in my pressure, but it's just adding another layer on top of what is already there, which is helping to darken it. So the reason why this is happening is if you looked at paper and you can even feel it, especially if you have a drawing paper, you know that there is a texture there. And paper is made by taking fibers, gathering them together, pressing them, and releasing all the water from them, and letting it dry that way. That's why when paper gets wet, it will buckle and swell up because those fibers are then rehydrated and expand. And it's also why when you tear paper, either wet or dry, you get those little fuzzy edges on the ends, and that's because you've separated these fibers that are all kind of woven and intermixed with each other, and you've pulled them apart, and you are left with little fibers kind of showing. So when I layer pencil on top of pencil, what I'm doing is I'm filling in more and more of those little fibers with my material. So even though I didn't change my pressure and I just kept on adding another layer on top and another layer on top, any fibers I may have missed in the first passing, I'm now creating a lot more dust, and it's going to fall into any areas that didn't have color pencil yet. And that is what causes the color to appear darker, because I'm filling in more of the white paper showing through my color pencil with a pigment. So working in layers using one color and just watching my pressure. Again, I didn't go any further than about a medium pressure, so I didn't get into a heavy pressure, but I'm very close to a heavy pressure value. The next type of layering we can talk about is using two colors. And in a 12 color pencil set, you will often find at least one color that there is a dark shade and a light shade of pencil. So I was using dark blue here for my example. So there is a lighter blue and a darker blue. My pencil set also has a light green and a dark green. So one other way is to layer two values of the same color that are found in your pencil set together. Now anytime we work with applying color pencil, think of it as when you work with paint. You should have learned in elementary school that you always start with the lightest color and add to it. So I'm going to start again about a medium pressure. I'm going to apply some of my light value, my light blue, onto my paper. Again, medium pressure. I'm going to use my circular shading technique, overlapping constantly, working my way towards the right side here. And this time I'm not even going to lift up on pressure for this first initial pencil. Now to start darkening it, I am going to control some pressure. So I'm going to come in with a second pass of my lightest. And this time I'm actually pressing a little bit lighter. So I'm not even on my medium pressure. I'm a little more towards a medium light pressure. And that is because one thing you do have to watch with layering color pencil is eventually you get to a point where all the fibers of your paper are filled in with material that you can no longer leave other material behind. So when you think about what we talked about, how paper is made, the reason why pencils leave a mark is that those little fibers break off parts of the pigment and material of our tool, in this case a colored pencil. So as long as there are fibers exposed and we move the pencil across the surface, parts of it are going to break off and be left behind. In colored pencil, you eventually reach a point where you filled all of the fibers. There's no fibers left exposed. They're totally and completely filled with material. And when that happens, then it's kind of like trying to draw with a colored pencil on a piece of glass. It's such a smooth surface that barely anything, if anything at all, is going to be able to break off and be left behind. There's just nothing there to work and sand down and grind down that material off of the pencil point. So you do have to watch when layering that you don't build up too much material at once. So now I'm coming in with my darker value, and again I'm probably about at a medium pressure, and I'm layering it over top of my lighter value pencil. And for this one, since I do want to fade into a lighter value, I am going to lessen my pressure as I come across to start creating this left side a little bit darker. So I'm going to come in again. I'm going to increase my pressure a little bit. So what you'll notice is as you build up layers, you do sometimes have to increase your pressure. But since I was not quite past my medium pressure, I'm probably slightly above it. I know I'm not pressing as hard as I would in this value range. And again, I'm going to ease up on pressure as I come across. And I'm going to go one more time. I'm going to press a little bit harder. And again, I'm not pressing too hard. I want to work some more of that material into the fibers. And as I come across, I'm going to ease up on my pressure so it blends into the other parts. So you can see I'm starting to develop that same value range, dark fading into light. Another way we can layer pencils is again using two colors, but sometimes you can use three, and I'll explain here in a minute. So I'm going to put 2 or 3 colors. And one way to create values with layering and pressure is to now also use white with our values. So since I've been fading off into lightness over here, I'm going to start with some white over here where I want my lighter value. And again, I'm not pressing very hard because, as I mentioned, as you layer a lot of pencil on top of each other, eventually you fill in all of the fibers and you can't leave any pencil behind. So I am not pressing too hard. I just want to get a little bit of white pencil down. I'm really easing up on the pressure here as I come across. And white is a little bit difficult to work with because you can't see it very well. Sometimes if you get it in the right light, you might be able to see a hint of it laying on your paper. And I'm going to now come in with my pencil. I'm going to use my dark blue. And I'm going to start with, again, a medium pressure, practicing my circular shading technique. So as you either follow along or complete this exercise, I want you to practice this circular shading technique. So as I come across here with the same pressure, it is getting a little bit lighter. I'm also noticing my pencil strokes a little bit more, even though I'm overlapping. And that is because that white has created a little bit of a smooth surface. So that is why, let's see if I zoom in if you can pick them up. That is why you can see a little bit of my stroke movement over here on the edge. There's some small little lines starting to appear here. And I'm going to go one more pass, again controlling my pressure. So over here on the left where I don't have any white, I'm just going to add a second layer of pigment, again overlapping using circular shading technique. As I come over, I'm going to ease up on my pressure again. And the white is going to help me with my light values. Now white can also be used as a blender. So I can lay white down first to help the color lighten up. And if you look, there's a slight difference between my dark blue up here where it's just nothing but layers and pressure, and my light blue down here where the white is underneath it. If I want to use white as a blender, I can go right over top. This is the one time where you're allowed to get into a little bit heavier of a pressure, closer to the type of pressure you use for dark, and that's because you're using the white pencil to blend these together. So what it's doing is it is smearing and smudging together all those bits of color that are on the paper and in the fibers of the paper. And as I work my way across, notice the color is changing. It's looking a little bit brighter. So do realize, even though white is not strong enough in color pencil to cover up a darker color, it will lighten it some. And it's smoothing out my shading a little bit. So that is one way in which I can use two colors, white plus a color. Now the reason why I say or three colors is if you do need this to be darker and you've reached your end of your darkest pencil, then you can use some black. Now the only thing is with black, you have to be careful because black can overtake a color quickly. Just like any material we use in which black exists, in that material it's a very dark pigment. So I'm definitely keeping more towards my light pressure range, and I'm adding a little bit of black over top here to just help deepen those blues into a darker blue value range, and then of course lightening up my pressure as I come across, so that the black just disappears into nothingness. So I could probably go a little bit darker with my application of black to really darken up that blue range, increase my values. And again, I'm not pressing hard. I am probably still at a medium. So I went from maybe a medium light to now increasing it a little bit so I can leave a little bit more black material behind. And again, working in that circular shading technique, I'm layering and easing up on pressure as I come across so that my values change from dark to light. Now, since I did have some white here and blended it with white, it is starting to turn a little bit gray in color. So if you are going to use both black and white while applying color pencil and shading to your project, be aware that you may not want the white and the black to overlap each other. And yes, since I did have this question earlier today, I could come back with some of my original color and go over top of the black to add more of a blue tone to it. Does it add a lot? No, but it does kind of get rid of that grayish tone that was starting to show through with the white and black mixing together over top of the blue. There's one more technique I want you to explore and look at, and it's another layering technique, and that is using analogous and adjacent colors. So let's label this analogous, or also you'll hear it called adjacent. And I know adjacent is a vocabulary word that you use in 7th grade. So analogous and adjacent colors on the color wheel are colors beside each other. So if I kept with my blue theme, I could use blue with green and with purple to create a value range and color mixing range. If I went with warm colors, I could use yellow, orange, and red. To create a value range and a color mixing range. So for this time, I'm going to work with the warm colors here. I think for your first practice into using analogous and adjacent colors to not only create values but also learning how to mix colors together, the warm colors work the best for this. So looking at these 3 colors, even looking at the paint that covers the pencil itself, yellow is definitely a lighter color, orange is kind of that mid-range, and red is definitely darker than the other 2. So these kind of create a natural value scale with colors beside each other from the color wheel. So my lightest value would have a lot more yellow in it. Anything in the mid-range would have orange, and anything in the darker range is going to be more red. So again, I'm going to make a practice strip here, and I'm going to use that circular motion technique. I'm going to go with a medium light pressure. I'm not quite at my medium. And I'm going to start applying some yellow down onto my paper. Now, yellow is a very light color. Sometimes it is difficult to see depending on the lighting and how much pressure you're using. So even though it may be tempting at first, even if you had a lemon drawn on your paper and you wanted to use yellow for it, you still want to work in layers with yellow so that you can build up value changes and have the opportunity to still mix things in to help you create values. So I made a long strip of yellow here. Again, about a medium pressure. And in the middle here, I'm going to use a little bit of a lighter pressure at first. I'm going to start applying some orange over top. Now, since I have that layer of yellow down there, just like when I had white down first, it is going to show up. It's going to be a little bit more noticeable with the little circular strokes you're making. And that is because your pencil is running over top of some exposed fibers that haven't been filled in yet with colored pencil, and some areas that have been filled in with colored pencil, so they're a little bit smoother of a surface. So I'm going to work my way over, easing up on pressure as I get closer to my yellow end. And then I'm also going to work in towards the right side of this value scale using adjacent colors. Again, circular shading technique, overlapping as much as possible, taking control of my pressure. And this time I'm not going to lighten up, I'm going to keep the same pressure as I come across, because I want to create a darker value over here. And now I'm going to come in with some red, since red's going to be my darkest value in this analogous adjacent. Okay, so I believe it is recording. So as I said, I'm going to start with my red over here. Again, I'm keeping to a medium pressure. I'm going to work my way towards the middle here. See if we can get that back into focus. I'm going to work my way towards the middle. I'm going to lighten up on my pressure as I reach towards the middle of this value scale. So what I'm doing is I'm starting to darken up this value scale of warm colors, and I'm also color mixing. So I not only have red, orange, and yellow here, but I have a range of yellow oranges and red oranges also appearing in this value scale. And again, layering is important. So if I want this to show up more, be a little bit bold and deeper, then I can come in and layer some more pencil over top. So if I want my lightest end with the yellow to show up more, I'm going to increase my pressure. Again, I'm still probably at a medium dark pressure. I'm not clear to my heaviest pressure of dark application, but it's starting to let more yellow show through here. Where I am starting to mix in with orange though, I do want to watch my pressure. I don't want to put down too much more yellow because I still need some orange to go over top of it. So again, I'm going to start more in the middle with my orange. Again, I'm going a little bit heavier pressure, and where the two, I want them to mix together, I'm going to ease up on pressure. And in this direction, again, I want to work with my orange to darken my value scale. As I start mixing into my red-orange values, I'm going to ease up on pressure with orange, and then again come in with red, layering a little bit more pressure. And as I get into my red-orange areas, I want to ease up on that pressure to let the mixture become red-orange. And that is creating a value scale using an analogous adjacent set of colors. So now that we've practiced this on paper, some different ways to apply our colored pencil. Again, emphasis on you starting to work with more and more of the circular smooth shading and less of the directional. We've talked about how pressure works with applying colored pencil and how it works with one color and layers, two colors and layers, 2 to 3 colors and layers, and analogous adjacent colors and layers. I'm going to now show you how I apply this to our project.